I'm thrilled today to have Manish Dudharejia on the podcast. Manish is the visionary founder of E2M, a bootstrapped digital marketing agency that he started with just $1,200. Under his leadership, E2M has flourished into a multi-million-dollar enterprise that specializes in providing white label services to other digital agencies. What sets E2M apart is its astounding retention rates of over 90% for both clients and employees, a testament to the positive, transparent culture Manish has cultivated. His approach intertwines philosophy, psychology, and spirituality, which he believes are crucial to personal and professional growth. After stepping back from day-to-day operations and embarking on a 90-day hiatus to reflect and recharge, Manish has gained invaluable insights. He's on a mission to teach other business owners how to achieve similar balance and success. Manish, I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for being on the show.
Thank you, William. Thank you for having me on the show. Super excited to speak with you today.
Welcome to Catalytic Leadership, the podcast designed to help leaders intentionally grow and thrive. Here is your host, author, and leadership and executive coach, Dr. William Attaway.
Manish, I'd love to start with you sharing a little bit of your story with our listeners, particularly around your journey, your development as a leader. How did you get started?
Yeah, I started originally my career in digital marketing back in 2007. And I worked for two different companies for 5 years up until 2012. Uh, and I'm kind of a person who is a keen observant and always learn what not to do. And I think, during those 5 years, I learned a lot of things which I felt like this is not how organizations should run. This is now, this is not how the culture should be. This is not how the clients should be treated. And there were a lot of things which I learned what not to do. And I mean, by no mean, I'm saying that those were not great companies. Those companies were great. I learned personally a lot from those companies, but along with that, I learned a lot what not to do. And then, kind of I became more of like pessimistic. I was like, I don't think I'll be able to find a company where I can get everything what I'm looking for, what the brand should look like, how the people should be treated, how the culture should be. And that led me to start E2M. So that's how it started. That okay, let me create something where I can solve all the problems. And so the goal was to create a company where there is utmost level of transparency when you are working with clients,
Hmm.
and the same level of transparency you maintain when you work with your employees as well, with your people as well. And you kind of create an environment where everyone is talking about the growth. And the culture is where people love to work, and people love to come every day. There is a freedom for people to speak on. And yeah, and also clients kind of feel like, okay, we are being taken care of. And there is a level of transparency which team is managing. So there were like multiple problems I was personally going through, and then kind of tried to solve that with it too. And that's how the company was started. Never thought we will be at where we are today, but here we are.
It's remarkable. I mean, to build from $1,200 to a multi-million-dollar agency where you have hundreds of employees serving hundreds of clients, that's just remarkable. I'll tell you the thing that stands out to me, Manish, is a retention rate above 90%. I mean, that's impressive in any industry when you're talking about your employees, but for a retention rate above 90% for both employees and clients in the digital marketing space, I'm not sure I've heard of that before. Could you share some specific things, some strategies or practices that you have found most effective in achieving that type of retention?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think one of the things which helped me personally to retain, to build a culture and company in a way that we have the highest retention ratios of employees, because I was an employee at one point. So I think,
Yeah.
I always kind of make any decision putting myself uh, in kind of position of an employee. Like, okay, if I were an employee, how
Mhm.
would I think about this decision, right? So that helped
Yes.
me a lot to make the right decision, where you are kind of like, people first company, where you think about people, and making sure that you are creating like, positive sum game. It's not like zero sum game where there is a
Mhm.
win or lose. There is a win-win situation. Okay, we are making this decision for an organization. Does it make sense for our people? Okay.
Yeah.
Then the second question comes like, this make sense for our organization, right? And if you develop that kind of like thought process, you will always end up making a really good policies, really good kind of like culture, which will eventually lead towards the highest retention ratio. And the other thing, there is a framework there is a very popular framework which I learned like literally few years back, but unconsciously I was following ever since I started company. The problem is like, there is a principal agent problem. So, what is the principal agent problem? As a business owner, you are a principal,
Mhm.
and your people are agent, right? And what you are doing technically, you are bringing clients on board, and you are putting your clients in, you are letting your agents, your people solve your clients, right? So as a principal, your goal is to make sure that your clients are happy, your clients are retained, they are being served really really well, whatever product or service you are selling, right? Essentially, if we talk more about service business, agency business is more around like service business, right? So essentially what you are doing, like as a principal, your goal is to retain your client and provide them the world class service. But what if your agents, your people are not motivated? What if their goal is different, right?
Right.
So
Right.
that's the biggest problem in specifically in the service business, and that's come a common problem in entire world, which is a
Mhm.
principal agent problem. So as an agency owner, your constant efforts must be towards solving this problem at your agency. And how to solve this problem? Making sure that the people you are working with, their incentives are aligned with your incentives. So you have to clearly talk to your people that, hey, my goal, my incentive is to make sure we are serving this client best, and we want to retain this client, and we are putting, our brand reputation in your hands. You are serving our clients on behalf of our brand, on behalf of me. My intention is that highest client success and highest client retention ratio. And in return, I wanted to make sure that your goals are achieved, and they say, okay, I want to make sure I'm being compensated in the best way, what I deserve, and I'm getting the learning opportunity. So there are two types of growth always people look for, which is a financial growth and knowledge growth, right? So you have to have that kind of conversation where the agents, your people, are getting a financial growth and knowledge growth. If they are not getting either of that, you will always end up getting in a problem where you are actually putting people, you're making people responsible who are, who their goal is different than your goal, right? So I would say, one of the key things is solving principal agent problem in order to make sure you have the highest clients retention ratio. And I always give the best example. Let's consider like an Uber, right? Uber is a principal, drivers are agent, and let's say me is a rider. So
Mhm.
Uber's principle is to make sure that me as a rider always book an Uber and my experience is great, right?
Mhm.
But what if drivers are not happy working at Uber, right?
Right.
And what it is going to happen, eventually I will not be having that kind of experience which Uber is anticipating. And
Yeah.
obviously next time, I'm not going to rate that driver, I might switch to Lyft
Right.
next time when I'm booking a ride, right? So
Yeah.
that's kind of a very big problem, the industry is having, specifically when you are growing really, really fast. So as an agency owner, as a business owner, your goal must be solving the principal urgent problem on a consistent basis in order to increase the highest employees retention ratio.
I think that's just brilliant because you're focusing on your people. You're actually seeing them as 3D human beings
Yes.
and learning how to equip them and empower them and focus on their growth. That is not common. It's something that I work with clients on in leveraging the inherent relationship that you have as their employer. But most people are far more focused on the bottom line. They're far more focused on the profit than they are on the people. Is this something that you have always done since the very beginning, since you started your agency with just $1,200?
I was uh, I was fortunate enough to learn few things way earlier in my life, and
Mhm.
because I'm coming from a very middle class background, and I grew up in a very small city with the limited resources.
Hmm.
So uh, this is something I learned over the period of time, uh, where I learned this Zig Ziglar's philosophy way back, uh, before even I started E2M. If you help enough people to get what they want, you will get everything what you want in your life, right? So that kind of philosophy I live by even today as well. So if you just make sure what your people are getting and be transparent, sometimes you know we have had so many hard conversation where if we are unable to fulfill what they are looking for, we'll rather ask them to leave because we don't want to be an obstacle in their growth. So sometimes people come to us that, hey, we want to learn this. And if that does not align with our business goals, we don't hold them. So we have an open door policy where I tell everyone very openly that, hey, you must be working here if you really want to work here. If you feel like if you don't want to work, come to me, have an open discussion. Either I'll solve your problem or I'll let you go, right? But I don't want you to be in between, right? So uh,
Yeah.
we have yearly performance review system twice a year where half people fall in April cycle, half people fall in October cycle. And we never do this practice where at that period we tell them that, hey, we are not going to give you the raise because you are not performing. We start talking with them like couple of months back that, hey, this is the problem we are seeing, where you have to, we are, I don't think we will be able to help you grow here. I don't think we'll be able to give you a raise. You rather find a new opportunity because we already tried giving them the feedback, things didn't work out. So we kind of like make sure to follow that kind of transparency. So I think in order to make sure that you are identifying the people what you are looking for, so that starts with like interview process where you are very transparent. Hey, this is what our business does, this is exactly what you do, right? So sometimes it happens, our main focus is WordPress development, and a lot of developers, they feel like a FOMO, right? That okay, there are so many new technologies out in the market like React, Node, Python, and we want to learn that. And I tell them very openly that, hey, we are very much focused, we know what kind of market we are going after. Almost like more than 50% of sites on the internet are powered by WordPress. We know what kind of market we are going after. There are 55,000 agencies alone in the United States, and we only
Hmm.
work with 300, 400 agencies, which means we haven't even tapped yet even like less than 1% market. So what we know what we have to do, right? So if you feel like you want to learn Python, this is not the right company for you. Better you find a new opportunity. So I think you have to start being so much transparent with your people in terms of what they are going to do over here, what kind of growth they will be getting. And usually in my experience, I have seen that if you have been transparent from day one, you will always have a highest retention ratio. And you have to show them that big kind of picture, right? You have to tell them
Hmm.
the market size and everything. And The last thing I would say that, uh, I always love what Simon Sinek says, that, you always look uh, money as a commodity to help your people grow, not the other way around, right? A lot of people consider people as a commodity to help grow their money. I think that's the very wrong way. So I really like that Simon Sinek's philosophy. Always look at money as a commodity to help your people.
I think that's so healthy and so honoring to the people that you employ. Your retention process it sounds like it actually starts with the selection of the people that are going to be on your team. Retention starts with selection, and this is something that we talk about frequently. Is there a filter or a process that you use when you're looking for the right people? Because this is a struggle I find among entrepreneurs and agency owners in particular, finding the right people for the team.
That's a real struggle. That's absolutely a real struggle. And that kind of led me a year back to make that decision that, okay, it's very hard. We have to grow fast, and acquisition is the only way we can grow faster, right? So although that was on my mind way back, that, personally, I wanted always to take that kind of an experience to acquire a business and what it looks like, right? As an entrepreneur, you always look for a new experiences. So that's definitely a challenge. We recently acquired this business, so that with that business we onboarded like 80 plus new team members, so that kind of solved problem temporarily. But we have a 9-10 people recruitment team, so they do certain kind of like filtration from their end, and then there are like a technical round happens, where there is a technical interview is happening, then there is a final round happen. So there are filtrations for sure, there is a process for sure, in order to make sure that we have the lowest churn rate. We kind of like when we onboard people, we keep them on a probation period for first 3 months to make sure to kind of observe their performance, and then we decide if we want to finalize them, right? So there is a process, but like you said, it is absolutely challenging. And now we kind of started thinking about going hiring people remotely as well, because it is already challenging, specifically being the largest company in Ahmedabad in WordPress space. It's kind of getting very, very hard.
The merger that you were telling me about before we started recording is remarkable. It's a really big deal, and the fact that it took place right after you taken a 90-day break, a hiatus. Both of those are pretty bold moves. A merger of that size is a pretty big deal. And taking a 90-day break is something that I think a lot of the people listening to this can't imagine, because they are at the center of the spider web in their business. Everything connects to them, right? They're making way too many decisions. How did you prepare your team and your business to operate for you to be out for 90 days?
I think one of the things, a couple of things from my experience, when you are in a building stage, you always focus on making sure that you hire a generalist, and then, making sure that the generalist become eventually a part of your core leadership team. And then when you are in a scaling stage, you hire a specialist who help you to scale your business, right? So in my case, coincidentally that happened. We have a core 8-9 people leadership team. When they were hired, they were hired for a certain role, but they have had that kind of like traits of being a generalist. And eventually those people kind of like been a part of our core leadership team, and then we started hiring a specialist team as well. So right now we have 8-9 people in our core leadership team. Then rest of entire 300 people team is like structured under those 8-9 people. And it didn't happen overnight. For 10 years, this is over 12 years of business. For 9-10 years I was involved into a lot of part, right? But then I started learning that, okay, it is very important that I don't think that we'll be able to scale further if I'm involved into day to day, including sales as well. So I think 2 years back, I started doing that practice where I kind of identify the people uh, who are the right people for that job, and kind of uh, freed up my time. And in order to do so, I learned this framework from Naval Ravikant. You know, I don't know if you read him, but he has
Mhm.
a lot of a business philosophy wisdom.
Yeah,
And he said that uh, whenever you are looking for an alternative for yourself, there is always out someone in the world who loves to do what you hate to do,
that's
right?
right.
So not literally hate, but imagine, for 9-10 years I was doing sales operations, and then 2 years back we have had a couple of people in our leadership team, and they actually were so much enthusiastic to take that role. And I was like, okay, I'm done with that. Right? I still love doing sales. I still love talking to people. I still do once in a while, but that's out of willingness, not out of obligation, right? So uh, always find people who loves to do what you hate to do. So in
Mhm.
that case, you are freeing up your time while making sure that you are not handing over responsibility to someone who is not capable to do so, right? So
Yes, yes.
then we identified a person who was really good, a fit for an operation, who has been here since very very long period of time. And ideally what I did is our entire leadership team got promoted internally. I did not hire anyone from an outside. uh,
Mm,
so that is something I highly recommend, because those people, that's a really good inspiration for your rest of the team members as well, that
yeah.
hey, if we have a potential, there are ways to grow, right? So we recently promoted our team. We recently I one of our core leadership team members, she joined 6 years back in a sales. From there, she was adding she became like VP of sales and customer services. And earlier this work, we promoted her to a COO. She's going to be a chief operating officer. So in 6 years, if you see the journey from a salesperson to COO, that's kind of an inspiration for other. And same happened for our you know a guy who was joined 10 years back, who was looking for like IT infrastructure, server security, and now we promoted him to a CIO and CTO level. So uh, that's what I would highly recommend. And one thing you need to make sure that when you do this exercise, you free up your time handing over sales, operation, finance, HR, IT. Then you do the same exercise with your core leadership team eventually as well, because then they are also looking for a new role as well, right? So that keep you have to keep that wheel spinning in order to make sure that people keep getting new opportunities.
Manisha is fascinating and I think so inspiring. I believe that elevating people from within, pouring into and investing in your team communicates so much value,
Yeah.
right? Beyond just what they do today, but the potential you see in them for tomorrow, for the days and years to come. That is so valuable. And I believe that is a huge component to your retention. One of the things that I read earlier in your bio was that your approach intertwines philosophy, psychology, and spirituality. Now, that's an interesting combination. Can you talk about that for just a minute?
I was 6-7 years back, I was kind of going through a very hard time. uh, I was kind of going through a severe depression. The business wasn't doing right.
Mm.
And back then, I was trying to understand everything, like why this happened. So when I'm more of a I have a problem solving mindset, and
Hmm.
and that's very natural in entrepreneurs, where
Yeah.
they run into any problem and they always start thinking about the solution. So when I was going through a very hard time personally, uh, I kind of instead of ignoring that, I became more curious that okay, let me more understand about depression. What is
Mm.
depression? Why do we feel
Yeah.
like that, right?
Yeah.
And how do you run business when uh, you are going through a hard time. And that led me toward like, okay, there are mind, thoughts, emotion. That led me towards the spirituality, and that led me towards the philosophy. That led me toward like how our minds work, psychology. And I started learning more about like mental model frameworks, because I wanted to make sure that, okay, I wanted to make the all right decision. Back in 2018, we were only like 30-40 people. And
Mm.
uh, I was like, okay, and I made a lot of mistakes previously. 2016, we were 120 people. We scaled back to 40 people because I did not know how to make the right decisions, right? So
Mm.
it just like, out of curiosity and out of that fire, then
Yeah.
you start learning everything by yourself. And
Yeah.
then you start, mixing up everything, and one thing led to another thing, another led to another thing. And that's how, and I feel like, any great CEOs, uh, I don't think the great CEOs can make any decisions without philosophy. Any great CEOs must learn philosophy. They must
Mm.
be understanding how, human psychology. They must be understanding the philosophy of our metaphysics work, right? Uh,
Yeah.
in order to, uh, make the right decisions. So I think, that's kind of must. It all came out of curiosity and out of the need. uh, but yeah, that's how I kind of ended up getting into all. And still it's a learning process. I
Mm.
still
Mhm.
keep learning more and more about it. But it's kind of fascinated, because eventually, regardless of the product or service, or regardless of the business you are doing, eventually you are going to work with human beings. And
That's right.
if you the more and more you learn about human beings, it would make it more easy for you as a leader to deal with them, and making sure that you are making the right decisions.
So true, so good. And I want to spotlight something here that I know our listeners have picked up on, Manish, and that is your teachable spirit. You are that curiosity that you described, you are constantly learning, you are constantly growing. And that, I believe, is a huge inspiration to your team. You've alluded to this at a couple of points in our conversation, but I want to dial it in for a second. Your team needs you to lead at a higher level today than they did 5 years ago. And 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now, they're going to need you to lead at a yet higher level
Yeah,
than where you are today. How do you stay on top of your game? How do you level up with new leadership and mindset skills that you will need to lead at that level when your team, your company, and your clients need you to be there?
I think the most important thing which I learned, that a process is people. uh, you need for a 10 people company won't work for 100 people. The process
Hmm.
in people for 100 people won't work for 200, and that goes on, right? So
Yes.
if you understand that, okay, you are always uh, ready for your next thing. So for instance, it is called a second order thinking. Second order
Hmm.
thinking, in philosophy, uh, sorry, it's a psychology, is more about like, you are thinking about the consequences of an action you are taking today, rather than you
Yes.
get fascinated about or you celebrate taking an action, right? So uh, when we are doing this merger and acquisition, we knew we are growing from 200 to 300 people. So the very first thing, comes to my mind, okay, what would we need to change at company level in order to scale further from 300 to 400, right? So what
Excellent.
are the things we have to immediately change in order to make sure that we operate seamlessly, literally from next week, because we are adding like 100 new people, right? So I think, you have to develop that second order thinking, where, and what do I have to do to upgrade myself? And the easiest way is to learning from others mistakes, right? So
Yes.
I kind of read the companies who have gone through hard times, who have kind of made it big, and I listen to some of the great podcasts as well, mainly around like entrepreneurs podcast who have kind of done it previously. So you
Hmm.
constantly try to learn uh, from others' mistakes. in order to make sure you exactly don't repeat the same mistake. And
That's right.
also, you kind of be mentally prepared that, hey, there is nothing called perfect, right?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
even as on today, if someone is coming from an outside and taking the CEO role, that person will file 100 things to improve. And I know that thing, right? And
Hmm.
I know that thing. So you always be ready, that, okay, we have to constantly change something, if to in order to make sure we are ready for the next level of skill.
That's so helpful and so good. And I love the intentionality with which you approach this. You realize that growth doesn't just happen. You have to be intentional. You have to be purposeful. The books that you're reading, the podcasts that you're listening to. Is there a book that you would recommend from your reading that if a listener has not read this book, you would say, oh, you got to put this on your list. This made a big difference in my journey.
uh, I would say a couple of things, a couple of books, which is like, uh, the one I read few years back, How Rich People Think. That's the one. The other thing is, other, Atomic Habits, by James
Yes.
Clear. Highly
So
recommended.
good. Mm.
Netflix, Culture and Code. It talks a lot about, like, how to deliver feedback to your team and how to
Mm.
build a great culture. Uh, the other thing, I'll highly recommend that Almanac of Nawal Ravikant, which is kind of
Mm.
like, a collection of his all 5-6 years tweets, but a lot of wisdom around, like, philosophy, psychology, mental model frameworks, business, uh, growing business, becoming rich, and everything. Uh, Recently, I completed like a book by, uh, Basecamp's founder, Jason,
Mhm.
which is Rework. So these are the great books, which kind of helped me a lot, uh, to learn a lot of new things.
That's fantastic. I haven't read that last one, the almanac. I'll have to check that one out.
Yeah, it's Almanac of Nawal Ravikant.
Excellent. We'll have links to these in the show notes. You mentioned podcasts as well. Is there a podcast or two that you think, man, this has made a difference in what I've learned by listening to this?
My First Million,
Mhm.
which is like Hustle, which now got acquired by HubSpot.
Mhm.
So, uh, My First Million is a great podcast. I highly recommend. There is the Knowledge podcast by Shan Paris, Fernham Street. The guy is from Canada, and he talks a lot about, like, mental model framework. And his podcast name is The Knowledge Podcast.
Hmm.
Uh, and then the third one is like Lanny's podcast. That's the very popular one as well, where he does interview all the popular, like, entrepreneurs. And Lex Friedman, uh,
Yes.
his podcast is also really, really good.
So good. Yeah, Manish, I want to take you back to when you first started your agency, when you were coming from being an employee to now being the leader. If you could go back and talk to that Manish, given what you know today, and you could tell that person one thing, what would you love to go back and tell yourself?
Focus. I think
Hmm.
we we have so many distractions, right?
Yeah.
You look at the social media, look at, like, what's happening in the technology world. Right now there is a huge FOMO in AI, right? Uh, and which is great, amazing technologies are getting out of, AI. So I would say focus,
Hmm.
pick a one industry, pick a one skill, and you just become the best at that skill, and then start selling that skill to one industry. So, and you look
Yeah.
at, like, before picking your industry, look at the TAM, which is total addressable market. And imagine, we started this agency focus, just like, although we were serving agencies from day one, but for first 5-6 years, that wasn't like just a focus. We were serving like every and any client,
Hmm.
B2C, B2B agencies. 2019 was the time, 5 years back, we decided that, okay, we will only serve agencies, right?
Hmm.
And that focus helped us a lot to grow and scale where we are today. So I would say, like, just be focused on one niche. Like, that's always a debate in agency world, right? Whether
Yeah.
should we, like, you know cater to any and every client, or we should just go after just one niche. So I
Yeah.
would say, like, go after a one niche, and that will help you to be very much focused and grow really, really fast.
Manish, this has been so fascinating, and I would just love to talk to you for another hour and glean insights from your journey because you have learned a ton so far. If you could boil all this down to one idea that you would love for listeners to walk away with, one big takeaway, what would you like for that to be?
uh, the one thing I would say, like, be obsessed about freeing up your time as a
Mm,
as an agency owner, as a business owner. I understand not possible for people who are just starting it up, but that's what your eventual goal should be. Be
yes,
obsessed about freeing up your time, right? And that is the only way you will be able to grow and think about other things, right?
it's
And
true.
when you become free, eventually, you will run into a situation where you will get in a boredom stage. But remember that boredom will lead to the creativity, and that creativity leads to, again, productivity. So be obsessed about freeing up your time. The second thing is about that we human beings are not wired to work Monday to Friday 9 to 5. Our
That's right.
minds are not wired like that. So
That's right.
if any given day you don't feel like working, uh, don't feel regret at the end of day that you didn't accomplish anything. Because that's, you always remember this lion framework, which I learned, uh, again, is a part of my philosophy and psychology. The lion framework is kind of like, a lion's framework is like sprint, rest, repeat. So always act like lion, think like lion. If you see the life cycle of lion, they will kind of hunt for, 24 hours. If they then, they will rest for 24 hours. And that's how their life cycle is. So if I still work like 18, 20 hours a day, but when I'm super, super inspired, so sprint, rest, repeat. So
Mm,
if any given day you feel like I don't feel like working, that's okay. Just like, do something which you really like. Go out for a walk, go out for a run. If you want to read a book, if you want to play a guitar, I know that's not a luxury everyone would have. So,
yeah.
but then when you are inspired, you just work like a lion. So I still like work 1 or 2 days where I work like 18, 20 hours a day, although I am like not involved into day to day. But you don't feel like, so ideas do not limit themselves, even like when you are in you are enjoying your weekend, some of the ideas might strike during the weekend. Just take a note. That's okay. And during the weekdays, some of the days you don't feel like working, that is absolutely fine.
I love that rhythm. I think that's so healthy. So good. Manish, thank you for being so generous today with what you've learned so far and sharing that with our listeners. I know folks are going to want to stay connected to you and continue to learn from you and about E2M. What is the best way for them to do that?
I'm more active on LinkedIn and Twitter. So if you search my name, Manish Dudharejia, even in Google, you'll find my LinkedIn profile, Twitter profile. I would love to, Twitter now it's X.
Yeah.
I would love to connect there. And, our company website is e2msolutions.com, where two is a numeric two. And yeah, that's, I'm more active on my email address. It's manish at e2msolutions.com. So if you are an agency owner, business owner, if you ever want to catch up, and if you need any kind of help, I would be love to get on the call, because always love to talk with like-minded.
Manish, thank you. This has been so helpful, and I can't wait to share this episode with our listeners.
Thank you, William. Thank you for having me. Uh, it was pleasure speaking with you.
Thanks for joining me for this episode today. As we wrap up, I'd love for you to do two things. First, subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss an episode. And if you find value here, I'd love it if you would rate it and review it. That really does make a difference in helping other people to discover this podcast. Second, if you don't have a copy of my newest book, Catalytic Leadership, I'd love to put a copy in your hands. If you go to catalyticleadershipbook.com, you can get a copy for free. Just pay the shipping so I can get it to you, and we'll get one right out. My goal is to put this into the hands of as many leaders as possible. This book captures principles that I've learned in 20 plus years of coaching leaders in the entrepreneurial space, in business, government, nonprofits, education, and the local church. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn to keep up with what I'm currently learning and thinking about. And if you're ready to take a next step with a coach to help you intentionally grow and thrive as a leader, I'd be honored to help you. Just go to catalyticleadership.net to book a call with me. Stay tuned for our next episode next week. Until then, as always, leaders, choose to be catalytic.
Thanks for listening to Catalytic Leadership with Dr. William Attaway. Be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss the next episode. Want more? Go to catalyticleadership.net.